Good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Mzansi Welcomes the World. This is our G20 preview show looking ahead to the G20 Leaders Summit, which will be happening on November the 22nd to November the 23rd. We would like to welcome you here all to our screens on Hilaal TV, DSTV channel 347. Well, as the G20 Leaders Summit is set to take place, this is a very first on the African continent, which means these discussions about how this affects the African continent must be brought into context. Will this summit allow there to be the challenges from economics to social ills to how Africans are going about their daily lives? We see the civil war unfolding in Sudan. We see coups d'etats happening in many parts of the continent. How do we as Africans find a way to bring the issues that are faced within the continent to the table of the G20 leaders? So let me welcome my guest. It's Dr. Frank Onyekwelu. He is the president of the Nigerian Citizens Association of South Africa, which is also part of the Africa Diaspora Forum. Dr. Onyekwelu, thank you so much for joining us here on Mzansi Welcomes the World.
Thank you for having me, and good day to all the viewers.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure having you on. Dr. Onyekwelu, in your view, do you believe that Africa's priorities are being sufficiently recognized within the G20?
Not fully yet. The recognition has improved, and because of that, it raises Africans' profile. However, our African priorities are insufficiently addressed within the G20 yet. We are part of the G20. We have a permanent seat, but you know, within Africa, we still have trade imbalance. We still have some debt issues. We still go through some climate challenges. Poverty is still wrecking some African countries, and some lack of institutional support. So I believe that if these priorities are derived and addressed, it will help in making required changes in the lives of all Africans and better livelihood and living.
You mentioned something of the debt crisis. I know a lot of the discussion has been with regards to trying to find a way to solve Africa's debt crisis. Can this G20 allow for it to happen?
If we are able to transfer what we say into actions and stick to the priorities, especially the African Union representative standing up to the game and making their presence felt, not just in words, but in action, I think it can.
Yeah. You mentioned the African Union. They've now got this permanent seat at the G20 table. My question's twofold. Do you see this having an impact? And if so, how significant is this in the continent's voice in shaping the global and political decisions? Because obviously, being the G20 presidency being in South Africa, I think there's been a massive push now for the African Union to have that seat at the G20 table, which we see right now happening.
Yes, of course. The permanent seat, of course, is a notable presence. It gives African a hope. And hopefully, if well harnessed, will give African the greater opportunity to be present in decision-making that affects Africa. It's a different story. You are addressing African issue outside Africa. But when we get involved, we help or play a part in addressing our own issue and bringing to the table, in making decisions how relevant priorities will be addressed. And we hope that our voice will be heard, not just being allowed to be part of it, but let our voice be heard so that it can help to drive effective change to better our continent. Yeah.
Doctor.
Yes, sir.
The Diaspora Forum, the African Diaspora Forum.
Yes.
Talk to us about your role, if it has been allowed, in really strengthening Africa's political influence in global forums overall. So just the importance of your forum in really addressing the African issues. Now, obviously, it's not just in South Africa. There are other African forums that are formed across the continent. But Since we are here in South Africa, talk to us about that. And have there been discussions in really addressing the issues that many of the Africans are facing across the continent?
Well, the African Diaspora Forum, especially talking to African diaspora and many that are living outside the shores of Africa, it's a very strategic position, especially looking at the expertise and the resources within the diaspora Africans. We can explore these opportunities. We will lend our voice to powerfully define policies and give direction to governments towards the economic growth. We can work together to really, with our remittance, to bring prosperity within the continent. The remittance to Africa contributes greatly towards Africans' economic stability, and this plays a vital role. In many African countries, you can watch the diasporans living outside the shores of Africa. They are contributing to the economic development of the countries where they reside, and with their remittance to African continent, it will further develop, bring more prosperity. You know, the diasporans, they are a bridge. Between.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned there, Dr. Onyekwelu, is that even the diaspora that are living in the US or in Britain or in other parts of Europe, and they've become naturalized citizens of those very same places.
True.
I think when South Africa took over the G20 presidency, there have been a lot of voices saying, hey, this is a nice opportunity for Africans across the world, not just within the continent, to say, you know, there are issues, there are challenges, but there are also positives. There's innovations that are coming. There are infrastructure that are coming that we would like to discuss. So I feel this is a beautiful opportunity for those voices to come through.
Exactly. I agree with you. If we can harness that opportunity, you know, based on some of the diasporans that are living in some of these countries, naturalize, become citizens, they can work together with the host country and provide technical expertise to African delegations, mobilize investment, and all of these things put together will help prioritize projects, developments, build narrative that will keep African issues politically salient and staying within the African continent.
Doc, are there specific policy areas where the G20 could directly support political stability and good governance across African states? What is it that you'd like to see in terms of policies that are being discussed, you know, either leading up to the Leaders Summit or the actual summit itself?
Yes, there are much more, but I'll mention a few. The G20, as a matter of priority, needs to invest in sustainable development in areas such as food security. You can agree with me that in some African countries there is food scarcity, and we see food security, crime prevention, health issues, infrastructures. These, if G20 can actually, focus on these infrastructure developments, look at where we are in the digital world. There are some African countries, remote African countries, that are still living in the absolute dark. When we bring some of these things to where it is essentially needed, it will improve lives. There is need for us to partner with governments in Africa to strengthen institutions and to make them accountable and effective. I think that I can mention a few things that we will need to, the G20 can look at, credible, transparent debt restructuring. Most African countries are dying in debt. If they can bring that framework where some debt restructuring can be put in place, conditional investments that strengthens domestic revenue system, where it will pay out to the indigenes, improve livelihoods, not making them more slave. That can impact in the African continent.
Here's the thing, Dr. Onyekwelu, and before we go to the break, you mentioned food security. And there are many solid farmers, many farmers who all they want is an opportunity to farm, but unfortunately it is not happening. So if it's not the state that's assisting them, there's no one else that's assisting them. How does a forum like this allow for there to be discussions to assist farmers in Africa who have the ability to do it, but all they're lacking is the actual funding? about funding without certain restrictions, for example, that being on debt.
That's where the point, that's where the problem starts. To have a vision is one thing, but to have the resources to back up the vision is another thing. Now, many African indigenes have this vision. Many of them have the strength and the creativity for farming to create food. In fact, if well harnessed, Africa can supply food chain that can sustain the entire universe.
Yes.
Because we grow we are blessed with mineral resources and the soil that can grow diverse kinds of food. However, the resources. And so G20 and the world leaders can play a part to create a sustainable resources that is not, the tax reform may need to be reduced. The conditions of the resources need to be considered so that it will not be another form of slavery, but an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for development. And then Africans can stand and be a part in contributing to the world growth and development.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Dr. Frank Onyekwelu. We're discussing what this G20 means for the African continent, but most importantly, for the citizens that reside within this beautiful continent of ours. Do stay tuned. We'll have more for you after this break. Welcome back to Mzansi. Welcome to the world. I'm still in conversation with Dr. Frank Onyekwelu. He is the president of the Nigerian Citizens Association of South Africa, which is also part of the African Diaspora Forum. Doc, again, thank you so much for staying with us. Doctor, the big discussion point is that of economic growth within the African continent and financial stability.
Right.
From your perspective, how does the G20 address this in making sure that there are key economic commitments towards Africa, especially, and there's two important areas in this, trade barriers and debt sustainability?
Wow. Those two are part of the big elephant in the room. But then to start with the answer, I believe that every trade barrier that creates imbalance should be removed. And we take out the tax regime to allow economic growth from African perspective. If we'll be able to remove the trade barriers that creates imbalance, then look at the tax regime, be able to allow it to have or create economic growth within the African perspective. More of inter-African trades, intercontinental trades, and balancing it will help. Also, looking at priorities like firm commitments to predictable but fast debt treatment mechanism, so that there should be a system where when you are creating the resources for the Africans to be able to harness or bring out their creativity, you'll be able to do it in a way that the debt did not drown them. And they are able to utilize the resources and live happily and also contribute to the global growth. Also, we look at the finance and the guarantees are behind it. We look at the targeted reductions of non-tariff barriers. We look at some of these things and we look at how we can bring technical assistance for some domestic revenue mobilization. We bring some of these things or some assistance to boost inter-African trade. There are so many African countries.
Agreement. I was going to touch on Africa Free Trade Agreement. Did you feel that's a lovely supposed forum for African countries to trade, because it's being pushed quite heavily?
It's a good idea.
Yeah, within the G20 also, yes.
So that if that is granted and allowed to be a reality, not just on paper, not just in words, but carried out with actions, then there will be much improvement in the next few years.
Yeah, I think President Cyril Ramaphosa has been really pushing. Yeah, he has been. And
he has been.
Let us see. I mean, obviously, with the African leaders that are going to attend, the G20 summit, whether this is something that can take a next level.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, hopefully. I agree with you, Doc. Initiatives on investment, digital inclusion, infrastructure. Can that practically translate into benefits for ordinary Africans? We spoke about infrastructure earlier on. It's something that when you listen to many of the citizens within Africa, they want investment within infrastructure. But then, of course, there's the digital part of that that is included in this, because there are innovations. We're seeing that happening across the continent where, digital innovations are just starting to occur. But again, like we spoke about in that first part, it needs funding, it needs investment.
True. Yes, I think the G20's initiative on investment in digital inclusion, it will practically translate into benefits for ordinary Africans if and when they can strengthen and have a strong institutions in place. Ordinary Africans will benefit from the prosperity and peace that such stable environment will drive. We'll look at if projects that prioritize local jobs. We'll look at affordable services. We'll look at regulatory reforms that protect consumers and encourage competition. When some of these things are in place, it will help to benefit Africans and improve their livelihood. I think so.
Doc, I want to touch on climate change. We've seen across Africa the effects of climate change. So many would say, well, Africa is not going to be affected by climate change. No, it has happened.
It's already happening.
It's happening. Whether you're in the west part, the east part,
it's
south,
happening.
Or north, climate change is there. A lot of it comes down to drought. How do we get this to be on the discussion table when that Leaders Summit begins? Because this needs investment. And I know currently, as we speak right now, COP30 is happening in Brazil, where Brazil itself is going through the effects of climate change, especially in the Amazon rainforest. But of course, we've got to look at Africa.
Of course.
What do you think needs to be discussed with regards to climate change? How does this get addressed to make sure that Africa does not bear the brunt of what we are seeing on a global landscape?
Look, truth be told, global warming is a challenge in Africa. The sooner we accept the truth, the better for us. However, you look at areas where policies are ineffective and not implemented. In this regard, the G20 should look at the culprits responsible for this pollution. And there should be an effective instrument to monitor and implement policies, especially those aimed at improving our environment. Countries and entities that are responsible for this environmental degradation and pollution should be held accountable and, if possible, sanctioned. Because it's becoming a global problem, and Africa is not an exception.
Yeah, I agree with you there. One final question, Doc. The African Diaspora Forum, with other civil society groups, how do you ensure that Africa's interest remains on the global agenda long after G20 is done? I ask this because for many years, and it's disgusting, it's sad that Africa has always been seen as this quote-unquote charity case, which is not supposed to be the case, because Africa has really, its history of innovation spans hundreds and hundreds of years. So how do this conversation about the priority of African citizens remains a discussion long after G20 summits, BRICS summits, or even African Union summits?
Well, Africa, we cannot continue to be a test pilot program. We are a voice. And G20 can do better by allowing seminars, programs that are designed to highlight Africans' development and build growth agendas. The civic society groups, as pressure groups, should also be able to promote Africans' interest. There is no better way to tell African story by Africans.
Yes.
And in doing this, it will improve in the global bodies. We make engagements that can sustain and develop our institutions. We create events, scorecards, track records. G20 can commit to making progresses and processes visible and publish progresses regularly, that this we started, this we have done, this is where we are, so that it doesn't be on paper and words alone. However, they can also include maintaining some multi-level advocacy in G20 capitals, give feedbacks, involved Africans in some of these projects. And with that, it will go a long way in shaping the future and the destiny of Africans.
Doc, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us here on Mzansi Welcomes the World.
Thank you so much for us. It's my pleasure. And we look forward to the G20 meeting. Yeah. And hopefully it will be one of the best ever hosted in Africa.
I agree with you. Definitely.
Thank you, sir.
Definitely. That's Dr. Frank Onyekwelu. He is the president of the Nigerian Citizens Association of South Africa, which is also part of the African Diaspora Forum. Okay, we're going to be shifting the gears now, and we're going to be discussing the role of Women 20 and its influence within the greater G20 context. I'll be speaking to Professor Nanya Bola Muller after this break.